Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Ray Lindley. I'm the Executive Director of Array Global, and it's really great to see you all again. Some very familiar faces here that we're really happy to welcome back, and I think I see some new faces, at least some new names. And so we're always happy when we are able to work with people from across the world. I see several countries already represented here in the list of people who are on the chat room. We have many of you. We have over 100 now on this website or this Zoom call, and then we have several who are listening to us and listening to the workshop on Facebook. So welcome, everybody. It's great to have you here. And I'd like to introduce, well, actually two people here before we go on to Dr. Jacob Frankum, who is the Associate Director, Executive Associate Director for Array Global, and he'll be speaking in just a moment. And Dr. Mike Poe, who has assumed the position of Associate Director, and we're happy that he is with us too. So Dr. Jake, let's have you go ahead and give the announcements, and then we'll get on to our workshop.
Well, thanks, Dr. Ray. It's always a pleasure to be with each and every one of you every week, every month. And we see a lot of the same people that are attending. And that's what we'd like to see, to help each and every teacher, people who are repetitively coming to these workshops, to get some of the foundational tools to be able to be an effective administrator or an educator. So we have people from all over the world, and we'll probably be talking about that during the workshop here. But again, welcome. A few different things I wanted to make sure that people are aware of. We have an art contest going on right now for your students. Any student from grade kindergarten all the way up to grade 12 can participate in it. I will post where you can learn more about that. And last time, didn't we, Dr. Ray, have 500 or 600 entries all across the world? I know we have.
It was a lot. I remember
a lot,
that.
Yeah,
too.
In our writing contest this fall, we had a lot. So this wintertime, we have the art contest. It's due by February 1st. So there's not much time left. So make sure that you promote that among your school and among your students and get them involved in it. There are cash prizes to be part of it. And we post the contest winners on social media, and so everyone can see some of the great work that's taking place. We'd also like to announce that you can nominate someone as the Teacher of the Year or Administrator of the Year for Array Global. You have to be a member school of Array Global to do that, but it's on our website. Please get in there and you can submit someone to be recognized for this great honor. Also, next month, February, what day is that? February 18th, we have Mr. Tony Crawford. He's with us today, and he's going to be presenting about instructional strategies and how to maximize time. So we're grateful that Mr. Tony could be with us. He's an outstanding educator from the state of Oregon, currently working in Egypt. So we're excited to have him back and presenting in February. So I think that's everything, Dr. Ray.
Well, great. And again, welcome everybody. And we're already getting close to 200 people on this site, the Zoom site. I'm very, very pleased to introduce Dr. Paula and Dr. Eric Kellerer. With the last name being the same, yes, they're married. And and so great friends of ours. I've known Eric since Eric was just a young boy. I hate to admit that, but he's been a longtime friend, and of course he made a wonderful choice in Paula, or maybe Paula made a wonderful choice in him. I'm not sure which it is, but we're excited to have them with us today and to present our workshop. And I think the title is pretty descriptive of what we're going to be doing. It's how to develop lesson plans. We've been in many schools where teachers really don't know how to develop lesson plans. So we thought this would be a great topic to discuss today, and two experts here to work with us. And so before Ernesto, you have your hand raised. Is there a problem with your mic or something?
Yeah, he'll have to put that in the chat.
Oh, yeah, put it in your chat, Ernesto.
Yeah. And he can send me a note directly. But
yeah, exactly.
Sound is working for everyone, so yeah.
Okay. Dr. Eric, Dr. Paula, welcome, and thank you for being, and we're yours now.
Thank you so much. What a privilege it is to be here with you and all around the world. It's a great honor to be speaking with you today from Idaho, cold, snowy Idaho, and I imagine it's evening in many of the places that you are. My name's Dr. Eric Kellerer. I am faculty emeriti at Northwest Nazarene University, retired from education innovation, and I love talking about anything education oriented.
Great. Good morning from here. Good evening in many of the places where you find yourself today. We are really privileged to join you again and are grateful for the opportunity. My name is Paula. I also have worked at the university as the Dean of the College of Adult and Graduate Studies, have spent some time in the public system here in the U.S., serving as a teacher, administrator, and recently as a superintendent of the third largest district in Idaho, which is a small state in the Northwest. And then currently I'm working as a vice president for a nonprofit that works to connect our businesses to our school communities called Idaho Business for Education. So we are grateful to be here. We, in planning this, have realized that across many nations and across many situations, private, public, rural and urban, that there are a lot of things that we could cover in lesson planning. We have tried to work a little bit globally, hoping that you'll be able to fit in those contexts that work for you. So let's get started.
Yeah. We have 4 outcomes for you today. We'd like to, first of all, identify some key components of lesson planning. What are those key areas? Then we're going to look at and understand specific areas where lesson plans can divert from the objectives. So what are the areas where we have to watch out for, be careful of? And then we'll talk about how to assess alignment of lesson plans with objectives. And then finally, hopefully we'll have enough time to practice adjusting lesson plans to create a coherent plan with stated objectives.
And as is our custom, we work really diligently to insert some great instructional practices along the way, hopefully that you'll be able to take with you into your own classrooms or your own schools.
With that in mind, let's try to find out what are some areas that you know about already. I've put a website up here, www.menti.com. If you have your phones handy, or maybe can hop to another screen, I'd like for you to go there right now. And so www.menti.com, use this code 2871767. And when you arrive there, it's going to just have 3 little boxes. I'd like for you to put in there 1 or 2 words in each box that represent key components of a lesson plan to you. So we're looking at what you already know. What are some key components of lesson plans that come to mind when you think of this?
For those of you who don't have that type of connectivity, we'd love to see those comments in the chat window. And while we're waiting for you to get there and fill that in, I noticed there's a hand. Dr. Ray, how would you like us to address that? So
right now, if you don't mind, let's let the people who have their hands raised to put something in the chat room so that we don't. And if it's an issue with connection or whatever, we'll try to work that out. But so that we don't interrupt your presentation, let's go ahead and put them in the chat.
And it's worth note too, Dr. Ray, just add on to that. If people have questions at the end of this workshop, as you're filling out the post-workshop survey, we'll have some time to be able to raise your hand and we can unmute and then be able to ask your question directly. But at this time, put the questions into the chat, or if you're on Facebook, into the comment box.
Let's see here. Let's stop. I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment
and share
a new screen with us so that you can see what you're putting in. So as people are entering their information, are you seeing my new screen?
Yeah, it looks great. A lot of good comments on there too.
Great. So I think we should just stop the workshop right now. Look at all of the expertise that already lives there. if you're familiar with word clouds, the darker and bigger the object is, the letters, the more frequent the information is. So you can see that objectives are coming up really frequently. We see assessments. I see that we have a lot of people thinking about engaging students at the beginning of a lesson with warm-up questions, some class expectations, certainly incorporating time management, teaching strategies. I love the fact that objectives is really, really clear in lots of ways. I'm just going to give it a few more minutes.
Activities seem to be clear there.
So we're watching that. Pretty impressive word cloud, I would say. So Mentimeter is just an activity that you could use in your classroom if you have access to connectivity, where you can collect a variety of thoughts and input, combine it together into a global picture there. So can you move this and see, there's some things in the chat that I wanted to look at here. All right, so sequence order of, are we back to this slide?
We will be.
Okay, so we're going to stop sharing the word cloud there. Thank you for participating.
That's a great formative assessment for us that we like to use. Helps us to really understand where we are.
And it emphasizes where we thought we might be with a group of people who are currently using lesson plans in a variety of ways and shapes. So like the word cloud, where we have a variety of ideas coming on, as we started planning for this workshop and we're Googling lesson planning, you might guess that there are a number of people who would love for you to adopt their lesson plan format. And you might have a lesson plan format associated with your school, your district, your country. But there are lots of people who would say, oh, we've got 5 elements, 3 basic components. Here are the 10 steps. 8 essential parts. We have a lot of national, world-renowned experts in education that would like for you to adopt their own plan. So what we thought we would do today is actually simplify this so that you could take your framework and fit it into these areas. When we look overall, there are 3 components, and within each of those components, there are specific things that you can add and place into that. So what's really important is that we start with really clear objectives. We need to know where we're going. So the title talks about a roadmap. We need to know where we are, and we need to know where we're getting, and we need to be clear and specific. We would encourage you to involve your students in making sure they know where you're going. So not just the teacher in the classroom, not just the school, but your students ought to have some ownership in understanding what your objectives are. I'm actually going to skip down to assessment, because I think in the end, as we're planning and constructing a lesson plan, in the end, you need to kind of know how you're going to understand whether students have achieved what you wanted them to achieve. What evidence will you accept that they have learned what you were hoping them to learn? And in the middle, the thing that connects them both is really the teaching and learning activities. Pre-planning, engaging students, those things that you as a teacher do, those things that students do, all of those should be aligned and coherent together.
Very good. So let's just start unpacking this. Let's begin with objectives. What are the objectives and where do they come from? First of all, that's a really important question, is where do we get our objectives? You represented on this call are many different nations. Each nation has sets of standards that you want to align to. There are content standards. There are standards that are specific to your school, things that you want to accomplish, your administration wants to accomplish. There are grade level standards and there are developmental standards. It's important from the beginning that you understand where you're drawing your standards from as you begin the lesson. And then as we think about those objectives, as we begin to build on it, it's really important to when we talk about areas of focus here along this journey today, we're going to talk about areas that you can get off track. And one of the areas that we can get off track is that we don't have SMART objectives. You're probably familiar with this acronym from other workshops, but we want to unpack this because we think it's very important that you have SMART objectives.
So when we think about this, and again, we've made an assumption that this is not new information to you, but it is a foundation where when we're starting lesson planning, if we can't be clear in this area, then the lesson plan can go downhill really fast. So being specific, who is going to do what responsibilities does the teacher have? What is it that you want the students to do? Will all students do it? Will some students do it? Will they do that in a group? Will they do that individually? How will you know that they've succeeded? Will you do a pre-test and a post-test? Is there some level of performance that you want them to think about? What is that benchmark? Will all students be able to get here, or will you have to think about scaffolding and providing additional information for some students so that they're able to step up and access that information? Will there be other students that you push forward and add more content to or expect more from their behavior? Does it make sense to students and where you are in that progression? Does it fit with your national standards? Is this a grade level appropriate type of activity or lesson outcome that you have? And then, of course, some outcomes take more time to accomplish. The deeper we go in the level of understanding, the more opportunity that we might have to spend more time in accomplishing it. So I'm going to stop right there and kind of look at the chat and see if there's anything that we need to redirect. This is a little formative assessment along the way.
Yeah, there's an interesting question, Dr. Paula, about lesson plans, and does the objective have to follow the ABCD method? I'm familiar with that method. It's kind of interesting where ABCD stands for audience, behavior, condition, and degree. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is where when we thought about how detailed we could get and how different schools, different countries approach this, certainly ABCD might be another way to think about your objectives. You think about ABCDE and you look at the SMART that's up here on the screen, and you can kind of do a cross map, and you can see where those things align. Many of your schools or districts will have those structures. We'd encourage you to be thoughtful about it. The goal here is to just be clear and specific so that at the beginning, we know where we're heading. You want to add anything else to that?
No, again, this is a roadmap. So if you are going on a journey, if you don't know where you're headed, it's really difficult to get there. It doesn't matter what kind of map you have. If you don't know where your destination is, the map isn't going to help. And that's why these objectives have to be written in such a manner that we know where we're headed, and therefore we can get there. And here again is that.
Here's a little visual.
Little visual of that, right? Understand your destination and then chart your path to get there.
I would also say right here that there are actually two significant points on this map. And if you look at this map, there might be multiple ways to get from the little home, the little house, to the grocery cart is what it looks like there. But you do need to know where you are. So when you're talking about planning lessons and looking at your students, you kind of need to understand where they are. That's why we started with a Mentimeter. You confirmed our suspicions that there's a lot of knowledge already out there about lesson planning that helps us know where we are so that we can make that pathway in finding out where we're going.
Right.
It's interesting looking at your map there, and I assume you're going to be talking about this. If you're going from home to the grocery store, you've got a direct route there. But there are also other possibilities for if you need to make some mid-course correction. And I think that's important for us all to know that sometimes we can't go exactly the route that we want to go.
That's exactly right. And that's some of the points of formative assessment along the way as we hear from our students, as we observe that they're not getting it, then we adjust and try another path. So let's talk about that pathway, the teaching and learning activities that take place in order to accomplish the objective. Yeah, why don't you talk about those for us, Paula?
Again, when we, again, many of you will have lesson plan formats that have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 steps. We believe a lot of those extra steps kind of fall into the teaching and learning activities. There's certainly that beginning of the lesson where you want to tap into previous knowledge that students have, or you want to engage and start their minds thinking about a topic. So in teaching and learning activities, we're broadly talking about what are those things the teacher will do in order to present information or to facilitate discussion. What is it that we want students to accomplish during that time? How do we engage them in anticipatory activities, engaging their brain, starting to thinking about the learning that is coming ahead? What adjustments that we need. We all know in a classroom of 30 or 40 or 50, and I don't know what your specific teaching situation is, but our students have different needs. And so we need to be aware of who's in there and what those needs are and how we might choose to adjust our instruction to meet those needs. And then finally, and Dr. Ray, I think you were talking about this, sometimes there would be a really clear pathway, but we don't have the materials available to us. So we're going to have to think of a different method in order to get there. We might have procedures in place. We might have to change our sequence of events. If we're really focused on creating strong formative assessment practices, we'll be adjusting throughout the lesson. Again, trying to always go back to, this is what I want to accomplish. Here's the objective. Here's what is important in this lesson. Do I need to take another left turn in order to eventually get to my direction? So the analogy of that roadmap, I might have a roadblock somewhere and I need to back up and go another route in order to add another layer of information in order to support my learners in getting there. So teaching and learning activities, for those of you with very detailed expectations for lesson plans, a lot of those steps we believe will fit into this broad area, and we want you to be thinking about that.
One of the most critical areas of understanding and teaching and learning activity is really the depth of knowledge that we're going to move into with our students. These have to align with our objectives. How deep are we expecting the knowledge to be? Are we looking at it at a simple recall level, a skill concept level, a strategic thinking level, or an extended thinking level? Let me unpack those a little bit for you. And these, I might add, you may be familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. This is somewhat in alignment with that, but Webb's depth of knowledge is another way to consider those areas. When I try to think about the depth of knowledge that I'm going to be expecting of this lesson plan, of my objectives, I like to think about it in the verbs that are being used. When I use words like, can you arrange such and such, or can you calculate, or can you define or draw, all of these verbs that you see in front of us, can you match, can you memorize? These are level 1 recall. Think about it in the sense that there's really only one correct answer here. And we're looking for specific facts and definitions, details, or procedures in the process. So if I get the students to that level, that's helpful, but sometimes I need them to go deeper. So I think about level 2. And in this case, I start using verbs like, could you categorize for me these particular items? How would you classify these ideas? How can you compare or distinguish? Can you graph this? Can you modify or predict? These are verbs that start helping our students to apply the skills and the concepts, explaining how or why this is taking place. Again, there's only one correct answer usually in this particular case, but we're going deeper. Then as I move them deeper in their thinking, I start in my objectives and in my learning activities, I start using verbs like assess. Can you cite evidence of? Will you compare or conclude from this information? Can you differentiate? Now I'm asking my students to begin reasoning and planning in order to respond. It's more complex. It's abstract thinking. It's they have to defend their reasoning or their conclusions. And we find that there starts to be multiple answers or approaches at the end. It is more complicated. And then finally, as I really go deep with my students and want them to find a great depth of knowledge, I move into extended thinking. There I'm asking them to apply concepts, to analyze, to connect, to create very much complex reasoning. And we'll find that there's not only multiple answers, but it could take them a long time to get there. The extended thinking happens over an extended period of time, multiple steps, multiple days included, and often a great product at the end. So all of these, you have to answer these questions in order for you to think about the teaching and learning activities that are going along with your objective.
So we really, if we recap where we are right now, we started with objectives and making sure that those are clear, aligned to those expectations that our administrators have, or that our country has, or that our school has specifically. Sometimes our grade level has those expectations. So thinking about that being really clear. And then as we move into the type of activities that we would choose to incorporate into this lesson in order to reach that goal, we are really wanting you to think about the depth of knowledge that you expect students to express. So this is an area where if lessons are not aligned well, the disalignment, the misalignment is likely to occur right here. So we might have activities that might be shaped around comprehension, but they don't really get to the deep level of understanding and demonstrate comprehension, because we're creating activities that really are only at the recall level. And in order to process, in order to process comprehension, you need to take that information and then perhaps make some inferences in order to get to that place. When we think of depth of knowledge and we look at national assessment results, so if your school participates in some type of national assessment, or you, if you're based in a country that does some type of assessment, or even at the school level, what very often happens when we see our students not performing at the level we expect, we can go back into the classroom and we can see that, yes, that topic was taught, but what's generally not happening is not being taught at the depth of knowledge that we're trying to assess, or that we hope that they gain. So in thinking about your learning activities, those things that you do as a teacher, the things you want your students to do, we encourage you to be really thoughtful about what type of learning do I want to take place, and are the activities that I'm incorporating, do they get to that level of understanding for our students?
Should we take a moment and look at the questions here?
Yeah, there was a question here from a lady who wanted to, I think it was a lady who wanted to know how you can apply this to ELS. I think I would give an answer to that, but let's hear what the experts have to say.
And it's ELS. Tell me what that acronym stands for from your perspective.
I believe it's English language. Am I correct? Whoever wrote the.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, is probably ESL, whereas English.
Oh, ESL. Okay, that's what I thought.
English language study, something like that. But if Alina wants to elaborate on that in the chat, that'd be great. But we can answer it just based upon English as a second language.
Sure, I think that's a great thing. I just needed to check that vocabulary and those acronyms. We're so good at throwing those around.
Yeah, Farouz, thank you.
So if that's what we're looking at, English as a second language. So certainly, I think at the beginning, if we have any type of sheltered instruction background and we're looking at the objective, very often our objective for that lesson is also accompanied by some type of language objective, so that we're kind of working two objectives together throughout the lesson. So some type of vocabulary development, making sure we're incorporating some verbal processing so that our second language learners have an opportunity to practice out loud in a safe environment to continue to grow in their understanding and expression of the language. Certainly in the activities, we want to be thoughtful of our second language learners. So if we need to support them through some vocabulary development at the beginning, so that when we're digging into that content, that academic cognitive language, that they have something to think about, and they've been pre-taught some of those things. So I don't know if the question was related to the objectives or the learning activities. But the third bullet or the fourth bullet there, which says we really need to think about the learners in our classroom. That includes our students who are learning in their second, third, or sometimes fourth language, depending on who we're working with. Being thoughtful of that and making sure that we have created the stair steps that they need to prevent language from being the barrier. And then certainly planning intentionally to extend their acquisition of language, practice speaking, adding to, looking at what's another word that we could use instead of this word. How is it similar to another concept that we might need? So thank you for sharing that. I think it was Elena, really important for us to make those connections.
And Samar has a comment here that I think is worth spending just a second or two with. Perhaps you're looking at it. I sometimes write a lesson plan, and then when I walk inside the classroom, I end up following or doing something different, and most of the times better than what I put in the lesson plan, which is fun. I like that. I just go back to something we've said in other workshops. The most important thing you have to do today might not be your lesson plan to start with. There could be things, as I think I've mentioned that a couple of months ago, Dr. Jake and I were in Turkey, and there happened to be a earthquake in the middle of the night. I hope that all of the teachers talked about earthquakes to begin, because I'm sure the students, and that will grab their interest. So I think that's normal. And I wanted to ask Eric a question. Dr. Eric, I listened to your comment about a level 1, level 2, and level 1 and level 2, you said there's usually only one answer. And then you went into strategic thinking, and you might have more than one answer. I don't want to put you on the spot. Could you give us an example about what that might look like? Are you with me on my question?
Yeah, absolutely. As we start thinking about level 3 and level 4, what begins to happen is we're actually beginning to apply that knowledge. And so when we think about 3 plus 4 is 7, it's always 7. That's going to be at level 1, and then we get into level 2 and say, if you have 3 apples and 4 oranges, that's 7 pieces of fruit. We're talking about a concept. But when we are starting to ask them questions in level 3 and 4, we're wanting to know what they can do with that information. How will that change the economy? How will that change the way you build your house? So that we're actually allowing them to think about those options. 3 plus 4 is still 7 at level 3 and 4, but how it's applied is going to look differently.
Or how you get there, or how you get there.
How you get
Right.
there.
And I want to talk a little more about Samar's comment too, as you did. It doesn't excuse us from planning to know that we might change things when we get in the classroom. We still want to have objectives, and we can adjust those objectives based on how many earthquakes happened in the night with Dr. Ray. But we still want to have objectives, and we have learning activities that are designed in such a way to meet those objectives, rather than just an American phrase would be winging it along the journey. So
I also think, Samar, you are one of those students that kind of lead this conversation, because it really leads us to the next topic. I think what you're expressing right here is somebody who's really thoughtful about some formative assessment. So you go into the classroom, you have this roadmap, you think you know what you're doing, and then you notice that something's not clicking with a student, or you notice that this group of students seem to be really taking off, but you have another group of students here that really are not getting the concept, or might benefit from another example that you didn't have planned. And so in this next, I'm going to move.
I would like to answer a question before we move on there.
Okay.
Delphine, you asked this question about, is it possible for students not to arrive at level 4 ever? Generally, that's only going to happen if we don't expect that to happen, right? If we're always teaching at level 1 and level 2 and don't give our students an opportunity to think in strategic thinking or extended thinking, then it's possible for them not to get there. But if we set that up and we understand where we're headed, we scaffold from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, we believe that every student can learn at a deeper level. But it takes time and it takes intentionality on the part of the teacher.
I think another concept that you could think about here too, besides the depth of knowledge, you can really, I want to talk about dispositions and attitudes. Dispositions and attitudes are really what are durable skills, those skills that we want our students to leave our school systems thinking about. They're good critical thinkers, they can problem solve, they have grit, they'll endure. And some of those dispositions that we want to incorporate, we want them to persist through difficult problems or challenges. Some of those things we have to intentionally plan for in order to move them into strategic thinking and to extended thinking.
So move on to assessment.
Yes, back to this, that formative assessment. Again, when we thought about this, we thought, we probably don't need to spend a lot of time because of who we are talking with here. And Samar really was talking about noticing things that were happening in the classroom that change what we do. It's a great form of assessment. It's a great teachers do it naturally. But generally in a lesson plan, you need to purposely plan for that. So how will you know if students are progressing? Are you going to have some guided practice that you then monitor and look to see what kind of mistakes they're having so that you can make some adjustments or add some support? And then finally, in the end, summative assessment. And sometimes we do that at the end of the lesson. We check for some type of quick understanding. Sometimes that's rolled up into a much higher stakes type of opportunity for students to demonstrate what they know. The essence here is, what evidence do you need? What will you accept that students are learning at the level and expectation that you have for them? It's a really important part to make that alignment between objective assessment and making sure that all of your teaching activities and learning activities are aligned with that.
Let's there's maybe 2 questions there, this question and this that would go together.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you are thinking at strategic level number 3 and sometimes 4 already when we're talking about this, but certainly within every classroom, we have students that are performing at all of those levels. At least in my experience and in the schools that I've taught, never has somebody given me a class where everybody's performing at the same level. And even let's say that they were at similar levels, they have uniquenesses and differences. So we have to intentionally plan for that. And then Bledar, what you are saying right here, where you're talking about anticipatory set, introduction of new material, guided practice, and dependent class practice and closure, that's a lesson plan structure that I hope you can see fits into the 3 big areas that are here. You start with that objective, that closure, often some type of summative piece of assessment, and then all of those things that you've talked about there are lesson activities, teaching activities, your anticipatory set, the engagement of students. So again, we felt uncomfortable choosing one really strictly defined format when we knew that many of you were dealing with 8 parts or 4 parts or 7 parts, or in some cases, the 10 steps.
Why don't we now take a little moment to kind of summarize where we've been? What are these areas that we could misalign our lesson plan? Again, these are things to watch for. Watch that you have clear objectives. Make sure that there's an alignment between the objectives and the activities so that you understand the depth of knowledge. You're looking for the verbs that you're using in the objectives, as well as the verbs that you're using in the activities. And then, are we aligning to the assessment strategies? Are we aligning the assessment strategies with the objectives?
All right, so now we're going to do a little practicing. Dr. Ray talked about shaping some lesson plans, and we brainstormed a lot how we would get 200 people to do that in a way that they got good feedback. And honestly, we didn't feel like we were wise enough to pull that off. But we have created 4 lesson plans for you that might have some issues in either the objective part, the teaching and learning activities part, or the assessment part. They might have some misalignments. They might have great activities that might not align with the objective, or some type of assessment that doesn't really make sense, so that we could get some practice at analyzing in a safe space someone else's work, right? It's always easier to analyze someone else's work at first so that we can then apply it. And then we're going to model one using the objectives from this workshop, and then we're going to share 3 others. We want you to be thinking about which of the 3 others you'll want to have some conversation around in a small group. We're going to try to do some breakout groups here in our Zoom meeting. Those of you who are on Facebook, we want you to be thinking about how you can engage with one of those and contribute through some conversation and some input. So that's kind of where we're heading. We're going to look at this in 3 broad areas. We're going to look at the objectives, we're going to look at the activities, and we're going to look at the assessment. We're going to look at those things that seem to be going well, that are strengths. We're going to look for alignment. Did the activities line up with what they said that they were going to do? Is the assessment going to get the information that they need? So we're going to look at this in 3 areas. And we're going to take a chance here. We're going to start with today's lesson plan. When Eric and I started this, we had a lesson plan. Hopefully you recognize those 4 objectives who are now on your screen. And we've kind of summarized where we're going. So we did some anticipatory checking for basic knowledge at the beginning through the Mentimeter. We've talked about 3 broad areas that hopefully you can insert your lesson plan format into. We talked about areas where you really need to look at and be strategic so that you're strong, so it's a cohesive lesson plan. And now we're going to move into some guided practice, and then you're going to have some group practice. So those are the activities that we have done. And then our assessment is looking at your conversation here, dropping into your group activity conversations. And then we do have a workshop feedback using a Padlet a little longer.
Little later.
So I am looking at some of the things here. What we want you to comment right now is, what are some things that are strong about this map? What are some things that we could improve on so the next time that we teach this, we can be more effective? Where are potential areas of misalignment?
I might add an area that we could add to this. We could have more time.
We could have more time. We could have more time. Yeah.
You know, one thing you said that I think there was a question asked about sharing lesson plans or whatever with the students, and you've phrased this in the term of objectives, and I think it's so important that the students know where you're going. And if you want to, I'm back to Madeline Hunter, sorry about ITIP, because students need to know from the beginning what's going to happen today. So I say anything you can share with students to give them this roadmap or the objectives will make them understand it better.
And
Yeah.
Dr. Ray, I knew you were going to bring up Madeline Hunter.
Of
and
course.
That you knew that I was going to bring up Harry Wong or John Hattie. In the chat, I posted some research that John Hattie and Harry Wong have both done. When you talk about objectives, it can increase student performance by 27% just by going over it, just having the objectives posted and go over reviewing them at the beginning of your lesson. They're very, very powerful. And I guess we could say Madeline Hunter probably said the same thing too, because I'm a big fan of hers too.
She said it long
Yeah.
before
Probably
you guys
long
did.
before that. I agree. Yeah.
I had the privilege for 3 years of actually going to visit some of the strongest schools in the world, the ones that had been showing the greatest gains. Without a doubt, one of the key factors that were in every one of those schools is that I could walk into a classroom, sit down with any individual student and say, tell me what you're learning today. And they could actually tell me what they were attempting to learn and grow in. And when I went into a poor school, a school meaning that was not doing well in their development, and I asked the same question of a student, they would say, we are on page 97 and we are doing these math problems. But when I went into a great school, they would say, today I am trying to learn my algebraic equation in this particular area. And they were very clear on what they were trying to learn. Students should know what the objective is.
Which is why we started today with where we were heading. If we had a little more time or a little more flexibility or the opportunity to have a conversation with 200 of you, we might have even taken a moment to adjust. So is this what your need is today? If we meet these expectations, would this actually support your learning for the day? There were some boundaries and some barriers so that we weren't able to actually do that. So going over the objectives, somebody also said, I usually write the objectives on the lesson. As an administrator, I always look for some visual representation that was there all the time so that students could look and see it. I could walk into the room and have an expectation as well. So there are a lot of people who agree with that statement, making it really visual so that everybody in the classroom can see that. What about the alignment of the activities that we've chosen today? So we could have chosen a lot of ways to get to these outcomes, to these objectives. Would you have done something different? Would you have hoped for something different? Do you have some other ideas and ways that we could have approached this and ended up with similar outcomes?
Maybe look at the verbs that are used to determine what kind of depth of knowledge we were seeking.
Great. Okay, and then finally, again, we even at the beginning of this, we probably weren't thinking about those of you who are joining us on Facebook. So how is it that we're going to monitor your learning on Facebook right now?
Yeah.
So we probably hadn't thought that through. We're going to move to the next session because I'm looking at our time.
Yep.
And thank you for participating with comments, for your good words. I'm going to right now, we're going to explain 3 separate lessons. We tried to spread this out over some content areas and some grade levels. You may want to whip out your phone.
I'm not sure we're going to be able to move into breakout groups because of our time. We only have 12 minutes left. So.
Oh, okay. Well, 12 minutes, we're going to make an adjustment. Does that sound good? This is our formative assessment. So let's look at this example, single digit addition, and we're going to watch for your comments in the chat. So I'm going to insult you by reading some of this, but you read it as well and think about alignment in this lesson, things that you might do differently. If you're an administrator, how would you have a conversation with this teacher in order for this lesson plan and this roadmap to be stronger? All right, so using M&M, students will model single digit addition. I can't tell you how many times as administrator I went into a room and I saw M&Ms or Legos or some type of manipulatives, which is wonderful in the context of, does it fit our objective? And does it get us to that learning that we're talking about? So teacher's going to model it on the board. There's going to be some guided practice at their desk. There's going to be a coloring sheet with beautiful M&Ms on it that tells a student, gives them direction on what color each M&M should be. The teacher says that they would look throughout the room, checking on student work during that guided practice time. And then the teacher collects the coloring pages and shares comments about the student's ability to follow directions on the coloring sheet. What kind of comments do you have on this? Do you like the objective? Are the activities aligned and point to the objective? Is the assessment summarize and get to the objective? We have some logistics going on here in the chat.
Maybe I could model some of my reflection on this
Sure.
with you.
Sure.
I'm curious, as this teacher is thinking here, in the assessment, they talk about students following directions, but is following directions part of their objective?
Yeah, it's a good question. Certainly it's a procedure and an expectation for discipline. Probably the point in this lesson plan that we were kind of hoping you would pick up on is that there's alignment in the activities on number 1 and number 2. Look at activity number 3. And activity number 3 might be a great activity. Is it aligned with what we were hoping to achieve?
Yeah, and it's interesting in the chat, Nancy wrote, there's good alignment between the objective and activity 1. So using that term that you just said is the alignment part. So powerful. Yeah.
Right. And even moving into guiding practice, I think that the teacher is probably still aligned, because now that she's modeled it, now he or she is going and making sure that the students can do that independently by supporting them at first. But when the coloring sheet comes out, and we've all been in those classrooms, and
I like to color.
You might like to color. And perhaps there could be a coloring sheet that somehow is more aligned with understanding single digit addition. So one of those conversations, and someone says, hey, a kinesthetic activity might be great. Somebody might be really involved in this, but how could we swap that last activity to support the objective we were working on? And I'll go, feedback about following directions will be great. Does that assess their ability to model single digit addition if it's about coloring M&Ms a certain color?
Good.
Thinking through this and moving forward.
Yeah,
okay,
let's move to our next example.
And this is probably going to be our last example if the time, I'm trying to see the time here. Perfect. Okay. So a secondary example, Incan and Roman empires. There are actually 2 objectives that this teacher was trying to accomplish. One of them really is an objective where they learn some information, gain some knowledge about the Incan Empire and the reputation they had for building amazing systems of roads that connected their cities and their people, the construction that they used and the purposes that they were used for. There's an assumption here that the students have already learned about the Roman Empire and their system of roads. So that's knowledge that's been presented previously and they've talked about. In this particular lesson, the teacher is going to use a KWL chart. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, K stands for know, W stands for want to know, and L stands for learned, what I've learned. So here's what a KWL chart would basically look like. In the first column, this teacher could be looking at and brainstorming with the classroom. What do we know about the Roman Empire and the roads that they built? What are the characteristics that they find? She can guide, or he can guide, that conversation. The second column, now that we've introduced that we're going to talk about the Incan road system in South America, students can brainstorm on what they would like to know. So based on the fact that they have some knowledge about the Roman road system, what is it they'd like to know about the Incan road system? Her second activity would be to introduce a video, and using Cornell Notes. Here's an example of Cornell Notes that the teacher has pre-populated with important topics that she wants them to really pick up on. Students can take some detailed notes on the right-hand side, and there's an opportunity for a summary of learning below. So that's what Cornell Notes means. So they'll watch a video, use Cornell Notes, and then they'll finish the KWL chart by looking at, okay, now what do I know about the Incan Empire? Here's what I wanted to know. Here's what I now know. So they have the opportunity to have this discussion. So teachers supporting it. And then the teacher says that his assessment, her assessment is going to be for students to independently, after those conversations, to build a Venn diagram. What's unique about the Roman road system? What's unique about the Incan road system? And in the middle there, the things that those two systems have in common. So that's the lesson plan. What are your comments? What's strong? What would you like to see differently? How could we support this teacher in being a more effective? There's some conversation about our ability to differentiate and whether or not our countries and our school systems will allow us to do that. There's a couple of folks who've had experience in using KWL and feel good about that technique. Mara, you did a great idea about some language for them to recycle. And if we had time to look at the next lesson plan, you would see some second language support in pre-developing some vocabularies, but it could have been incorporated into this lesson, looking at those vocabulary words that they would be experiencing. Good ideas. Sanam says that Venn diagram is used in their context. Question is, did the teacher use props? What did it look like? Was this a big chart at the beginning of the class? Do students follow along at their desks? Those are some activities that we could consider to add to the engagement of students. And Frez is correct. Finishing that KWL certainly could be a formative assessment there on how students' knowledge is progressing. Great. So some good feedback
Yeah,
there.
excellent feedback.
I'd like to go back to the M&Ms for a second. Number one, you made me want to run to the cupboard and get some.
Yeah.
But you know, I think every once in a while, and I know we all believe this, if the teacher is feeling that maybe the lesson is becoming a little too sterile, maybe, and it might be a good time here. You just take 30 seconds and say to the students, hey, there are several kinds of M&Ms. What kind do you like? Just take 30 seconds to kind of let them see your humanity in this. And then you get right back to the lesson. And I was thinking about that because I thought, oh, wow, that looks good. I want some. But it, you know, I think the teacher in getting through these objectives and getting through these activities and so forth, that it's really good to be human once in a while. Say, hey, I love peanut M&Ms. They're my favorite or whatever. And then 30 seconds is all it takes. And you can get right back to it and you'll find a new level of interest on the students.
What's also really important here and comes up often is that you really have to know your procedures and expectations well. You set M&Ms in front of 6-year-olds and there can be chaos in a classroom. So what would a teacher have to do in order to set the expectations and the context so that you could actually get to single digit addition? So really thinking through those procedures and expectations ahead of time.
And I want to add, I travel quite a bit. M&Ms are not available in every country. I do
recognize. True statement. All right.
Why don't we kind of shift gears here and think about how where we've come in this journey. I'd love for you to kind of reflect with us on a few items. If you have your phone, you can scan that QR code. I'm also going to drop in a URL into the chat for everybody, if I can get it going to everybody here. Let's see, how do I go to everyone?
Everyone.
Oh, everyone in the meeting.
It's everyone right at the top.
There we go. There's a URL for you. I'd like for you to go to this Padlet, and there's 4 columns there. You can just click on the plus sign under each column and say, what's one new item that you've learned today? What's one thing I can implement tomorrow?
Or Monday, or
Yeah.
whenever the next time is you're in a classroom.
And one thing I would like to know more about. And then if you have some comments, put those in that final column. And
Perfect.
I'll share that screen, and so you can see, or actually as you're typing it in, you can see, but our folks, some people may not have access to it. So I will hop over there and share that screen with us.
And thanks for those of you who aren't able to access the Padlet for sharing those thoughts in the chat. Looking at differences is essential among students who have different cultures, more than one language. Objectives. There's some people really engaged with M&Ms. Notice also in the chat that M&Ms may not be an appropriate activity across all of our cultures. And so that's really important. Would I do that in a classroom here in Idaho? Probably. Would there be classrooms in other parts of the world where that would be inappropriate? For sure. There are some folks who will work on implementing KWL. And again, in a 1-hour workshop, here's our greatest fear. You can hear today, you can be encouraged, but if you don't practice tomorrow, your instructional strategies won't change. So I encourage you right now. Someone said, does KWL and other activities work across content areas? You bet. There are lots of ways to be creative in using it. So go out and practice it. KWL is something, Venn diagrams, things they'd like to know more about. Ray and Jacob, they'd like to know more about M&M. So I don't know how you incorporate that in the next workshop.
I think you should take them every time you go to a country.
Looks like there might be some activities and opportunities to explore depth of knowledge a little bit more.
Oh, I think that's fun. We could spend a whole day on talking about depth of knowledge. I would love that stuff.
It sounds like you're queued up really well next month when we're talking about other techniques or other instructional strategies. Somebody says that's what they would like to know more, and it sounds like that's already on tap for February.
You'll love Tony.
You are being really kind in your final comments there. We appreciate that. We just want to take a moment to thank you for allowing us to share and to be with you for just a moment. 60 minutes is hardly enough time to really engage with a large group of people, but we're thank you for your kind attention and the opportunity for us to come and share for a little bit and facilitate this discussion.
Great. And I pop our addresses up there if you'd like to contact us or contact Array Global, and they can contact us either way.
Well, thank you, Dr. Eric and Dr. Paula, very, very much. I'm really excited about the comments that I'm seeing in the chat and the list of responses that you've received. As you have suggested, 60 minutes is very difficult to cover this subject. But if nothing else, if we have, through the workshop, which you have so well presented to us today, if nothing else, you've made us all think again about the best way that we can develop. And all of the answers will not be solved in one 1-hour workshop, but if you just get us to start thinking. So many times we don't think about these things, and just to be directed in this direction. We probably will not take time for questions because our time has brought up. You can put your questions if you want, and Dr. Jake will talk about the summative form that you're going to fill out for the evaluation of the workshop. And if there are specific questions, and I thank both Dr. Eric and Dr. Paula for putting their email addresses on there. I know they're good people, and they would just, if you write to them with a question, I'm sure they would be willing to respond. So Dr. Jake, you want to kind of summarize and remind us of a few things?
Yeah, thanks, especially right before you give your words of wisdom. After Dr. Ray gives his words of wisdom, we're going to post the post-workshop survey in the chat and also on our Facebook live feed that we have. But before I do that, and before I turn the time back over to Dr. Ray, I'm going to post in the chat a link so you can join our Array Global Educators Association. This is a closed Facebook group that Dr. Mike runs most of it. And you can post questions for us and we can get on and answer those questions. You can answer some of the questions of your colleagues from around the world. You can write some of the successes that you've seen, and we'd love to have you join. So click on that, join if you want to, and you want to give some support and get some advice too. So I think with that, Dr. Ray, we just want to make sure everyone is aware of the workshop. We're very excited to have Mr. Tony present next month, February 18th, the same time. Please get into our website, check out our services. If your school is interested in being part of Array Global, we'd love to work with you and love to work with your administrative team and your teachers. So please check out our website at arrayglobal.org. And again, there's more questions coming on there. Please make sure you follow along. The post-workshop survey will be posted after Dr. Ray is done giving his final words. And then you can fill that out and you'll get a certificate by the middle of next week. If you do not get it by Friday, please reach out to us at info@arrayglobal.org. And again, all these videos are recorded on our YouTube channel. You can watch them on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel if you want to go back and remind yourself on some of those things. So with that, Dr. Ray, back to you.
Well, thank you all, everybody. I ran across a statement the other day that I'm using as our final words of wisdom today. I just put it in the chat room. I think it's important for us all to remember how you make others feel says a lot about who you are. Think about that. How you make your students feel said a lot about who you are. How you make your fellow educators or fellow family members or whatever says a lot about who you are. So let's remember that. We always have to project the kind of personage that we want people to see. So think about how you make others feel says a lot about who you are. So thank you again, everybody. And we will see you again on February 18th, we hope. And we'll be ready to have Mr. Tony, good Oregonian here from Oregon, present the next workshop. So thank you again, Dr. Paula, Dr. Eric, and we'll see you soon.
And so we will post the survey. It's in the chat now. We've disabled the chat just so everyone can see the link, fill that out. If you have questions, you can raise your hand. And Dr. Ray, if you're okay with that, we'll take a few questions.
Well, I'm fine with it as long as people don't mind staying, and I'm not sure if our two presenters.
Oh, but Dr. Ray, I don't know. We have Farouz is our first guy who's raising his hand. Should we? He's always our first guy. He always puts us on the spot too. He is one of our best participants that we've had, and we really, really appreciate his help and support and his association and getting the word out and getting so many people to attend. So Farouz, I'm excited to hear this question.
First of all, allow me to thank our fantastic tandem of presenters, Mr. and Miss Kellerer. It was fabulous, and I especially enjoyed the very relaxed pace of your presentation that allows students to fully immerse in the positive vibe and aura that you created to enjoy the fun and joy of learning and discovery. That's a lesson in itself. You know, you demonstrated a wonderful lesson within the presentation. So thank you very much. And my question is back to something you mentioned earlier. What do you think if the students are very much in need of scaffolding? How would you expect them to take ownership of building an effective roadmap if they are themselves in need of guided discovery and scaffolding? How would they take ownership of their roadmap and how would they figure out what they really want by the end of the year, by the end of the academic year? I hope my question is clear. Thank you.
Well, I'll take a start at that. I took the mute off, I think.
Thank you.
this will take time to begin to help your students actually begin thinking of their own objectives. Goal planning with students can begin at a very early age. What is it that you want to do and how are you going to accomplish it? If we can ask those questions early on, begin to help them to craft their own objectives, craft their own goals, it will help them take ownership of their learning. Ultimately, we want them to begin to really own that learning process. Ask themselves, what are the holes in my learning that would help me to be better at learning this thing that the teacher is asking me to do? So it takes time. It takes a rhythm that will have to be a natural part of the classroom. And I would say to teachers that have been teaching at a lower level of depth 1 and 2 for a long time, that you need to begin to scaffold that very carefully and slowly. Don't expect to have your kids, your students, own that learning overnight. It does take some time.
I would just add to it, wonderful question, by the way, by incorporating reflection a little bit. Once a student has success, so maybe that teacher is the one providing the scaffold, providing the vocabulary words that they might need in order to access that. And for a student to reflect, I felt good about this. What were the components? What happened in order for me to have the success? Now, how can I begin to create that same type of thing? In the next reading passage, maybe I can support my own learning. So really adding that component of reflection about what has made me successful and how I can incorporate those into new learning experiences. Great question.
And I think also, Firuz, I think part of our job that is overriding all of this is to help students want to know the information, want to know why this is important to me as an individual. So that has to be built into the overriding thing that we're doing, is to help students desire. And that's a real technique that great teachers help students understand.
Thank you.
We had another hand, but is it Naitu? I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. You want to unmute yourself and ask your question? There you go.
Okay, thank you, and congratulations for the good lesson that we have provided to us. Lesson plan is a very instrument for a teacher to deliver the required skills, and a teacher should prepare well the activities that should be done in the class. My question is, how does the environment and teacher's ability to plan and deliver well the classroom activities affect the learning outcome, especially to the second learners? Thank you.
And I just want to clarify, make sure that we understood there. You said that lesson planning really is a skill that teachers need to practice and be thoughtful about doing. And then will you ask the second part of your question right there?
Yes. Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Pardon?
Can you repeat your second part of your question?
My question, I have said the lesson plan is very important for a teacher to make the activities that should be done in the class so that the student can understand the lesson. And my question is, how does the environment and the teacher's ability to plan and deliver the classroom activities affect the learning outcome?
Yeah, really wise. The first thing that I think of in listening to that question and understanding it. So I do think that you have a variety of skills that are represented in teachers. And I think our new teachers who are still struggling with classroom procedures, classroom discipline, classroom expectation, can often be limited in the types of activities that they incorporate until they've really practiced and set up that classroom environment in order for students to understand and have clear expectations. I do think, however, though, as teachers, even though I may not be as skilled as the person who's in the classroom next to me. Modeling learning for our students is a wonderful opportunity. So I may not have done this type of lesson before, or we haven't done Venn diagrams before, or maybe KWL is new, but together, class, we're going to learn this together. So I think that the more we practice, the more skills that we get. We have to have the confidence to try new things because we model learning that way. And then as an administrator or a colleague, helping our newer teachers really have clear procedures, routines, practices that allow them to incorporate a variety of activities. I hope I've connected with your question.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. And I would also say it's a cultural question. The place of a teacher in different cultures is quite different, but I think the best teachers also recognize what they don't know. And it's a secret. I'm going to tell you, let me move close to the mic so nobody hears me, okay? This is a secret. As teachers, we don't know everything. And if we can start modeling, as Dr. Paula said, modeling this curiosity. In fact, let me give you a quick example, real quick. Had a third grade teacher that was wanting to use technology in the classroom. That technology is not available to all classrooms. And if this particular teacher had never had technology in the classroom, but they wanted to use it, and they began to teach, but they said, Dr. Eric, I don't actually know how to use it myself very well. I said, you know what? Your third graders do. and the third graders, so here's the deal. The students knew how to use the technology, but the students did not know how to learn with the technology. So the teacher was walking alongside of them, helping them to be curious, helping them to ask good questions, structuring the lesson so that they had to explore using the technology, but the students actually helped the teacher learn the technology. So it takes some humility, and sometimes it's very culturally difficult to admit that you don't know everything. But in a really, if we can model that, our students will begin to recognize that they can learn for the rest of their lives. So, good question.
We'll take one more question. Ahmed, if you want to unmute yourself, we'll let you ask your question. We'll hope it's a short one and a short answer. Ahmed, do you want to?
Ahmed raising his hand?
Yes.
Ahmed is.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right at the top there.
There he is.
There he is.
Doctor?
Yes.
Hello everyone.
Yes.
Ahmed.
Thank you for your time. I think that's a very fruitful live. Thank you very much for you all. My question is my voice clear?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, my problem is time management. Actually, I can't adapt time management to my lesson plan. So what's your advice about it?
Well, the first thing I want to say before Dr. Paula, Mr. Tony Crawford is going to be talking about time management next month's workshop. So Tony, that's a good lead-in for you on time management.
It's perfect, and maybe we should just defer that question. No, I think I would incorporate time management with that formative assessment. Much like we did today, we were really hoping we could have some really group discussion. And even though we had planned and practiced, it didn't work out that way. And again, as we would present this workshop again, we would have a better understanding of how much time it takes in that discussion. So some of it's skill in practicing it. Some of it is just really watching and making adjustments. And then you have to measure that against your objective. So if it goes really wrong, I may have to come back and reteach that objective because I didn't get all of those things in place. So great question. It's something that I think every teacher struggles with every day. Experience helps us get better at it. But then our kids will always surprise us and keep us humble. And we will have to make adjustments because time does go awry. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, good question.
Okay, with that, we will close the conversations now. Thank you all again. Dr. Jake has posted the survey on the chat room, and be sure to fill that out. And that's the basis for which we'll be able to send your certificates of participation. Again, thank you. Have a great evening for most of you. It's just a little afternoon our time. And so we're our days only halfway going through there, but most of you are probably ready to as we say in the US, hit the hay, meaning go to sleep. So have a good evening, everybody.